Hey, welcome to episode 7 of AI, What the Tech, where we continue to explore the complexities of artificial intelligence in higher ed. Remember that you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all major podcast platforms, or wherever you want. You know, we'll find a way if we're not on it. If you're having trouble finding us, I had a couple of people mention they had trouble. I think we're in all caps, right?
So we are in all caps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need to search all caps, and please do hit the follow button. I explained this to a couple other people. We live in this modern economy where likes ultimately equal open opportunities. Mm-hmm. So when you like and follow us, that means we get more options on some of these platforms. So we need you to like and follow us. So we would appreciate that support. Helps us reach more people and do more things. Yep. So where are we now? Well, in episode 6, we talked about how institutions respond to AI through the policy. That was Will's discussion with us.
Yes.
Really, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk through the processes on the faculty side. Right, Bhaskar?
Oh, yes, we are. And before we continue, introductions. This is Bhaskar Ghosh.
That's Sean Huss,
just in case you forgot. So today we're going to move from the procedural to the pedagogical, right? So we're going to talk with faculty who are dealing with these issues directly day in and day out. They're trying to reach, assess, mentor, and uphold academic integrity in a world where students have access to generative AI like 24/7. Right. But before that, if you're enjoying our show and want to keep it going, we can really use your support. So go ahead to buy me a coffee. Every contribution counts, goes towards making more content, improving the podcast, and just bringing you even better conversations. Right. So just head to the link in the description. Whether it's a single cup of coffee or a full caffeine boost, every bit helps.
Every bit helps.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, today we're going to be joined by 2 faculty guests. They bring some insight and experience into the conversation. Dr. Jeremy Schwehm and Professor Tiffany Nance. They represent years of experience and someone who's relatively new, not too new. I think Tiffany's been here a while, but
she's been around a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the goal is to get a diversity of experience both online and in class, and trying to catch some of the students. And we've been doing departmental interviews, and these 2 really stood out as people who kind of have a sense of what's going on and how to respond. So that's why we brought them on. Jeremy is a professor of organizational studies here at ATU. Mm-hmm. He teaches courses on organizational development and learning, organizational change, community leadership. He teaches both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And he's been doing it for 15 years, including experience online. Mm-hmm. He's a member of things like the American Association of Adult and Continuing Ed, the Distance Learning and Technology groups. And he's essentially met every online learning innovation, and he likes them all, at least until this one. So that's going to make this
That'll be an interesting
weird
conversation with him. Yeah.
Right. Tiffany is a psychology instructor in the behavioral sciences department at Arkansas Tech. She focuses on human development. She teaches all the developmental classes. She's been at Arkansas Tech 13 years, 10 of those online, and the last 3 in person. Fun fact, during her first decade, she was also juggling a full-time gig teaching 12th grade English. Wow. So she was both an instructor in our department and teaching 12th grade English at one of the high schools. This is another area that she can speak to in terms of AI use. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the conversation around AI and education, she brings a lot of real world experience. So earlier when I said she's relatively new, I probably should amend that and say she's relatively new compared to most people in the professor position she's in. Right. She's been teaching easily as long, if not roughly the same time period as long as Jeremy. So anyway, 2 solid guests. We're excited about this.
Absolutely are. So do we let them in?
I say we let them in.
Let's do it.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Tiffany.
Hey.
Hey, all.
Hello.
How are you
So,
doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you for making it. I think this is
and
going to be a wonderful conversation.
I think so too. And thanks for covering up that LSU flag,
Oh,
Jeremy.
every now and again, I'll lean over just so you can see it.
So, coming to our discussion today, we are going to build off of works of authors and researchers like Yuk Chan and Tom Colton, Pritin Shah, Ethan Mollick, and we'll also reference recent journalism articles and institutional guidelines from MIT Sloan and the Washington
hmm
Post, right, Sean?
there are a few others. Chronicle of Higher Ed's been doing a real deep dive over the last several months, so
Hmm.
we've got a long list of those. I assume we'll put all that up in the details.
We will. Hmm.
hmm So we're going to cover faculty experiences with AI detection, some of the emotional and sort of ethical toll that this misconduct is going to raise for us, and innovations in design, changes in pedagogy. And the goal here is to find out how to help students engage with AI responsibly. So, you guys ready to get started?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start by keeping it grounded, just in terms of personal experience. This is a question for both of you. This is the first time we've had two people, so
All
we're,
right.
we're curious how this is going to work out. Just in general, when and how did you first encounter AI generated student work? And what's your immediate reaction? How did it change what you were doing?
You want me to go first, Tiffany, or you?
Sure.
Okay, sure. So I'll be as brief as I can, but I have two different experiences, and they were very different. One was in a face-to-face classroom, one was online, and one was very early in the release of, I think, of ChatGPT, and one was a little bit later on. But my very first experience, I think, was spring of 23. It was in a 2000 level ethics course, and I had asked about the application of the Lonergan-Baird method. It's a staged ethical decision making model, and one of the students in the class had their computer in front of them. And they were like, "Ooh, I know," and I could see them reading from their screen, and it was an interesting take. But I knew that they did not have the opportunity to type all that up and then articulate it back to the
Mhm.
class. So I was like, "Well, what?" I was like, "What are you reading from?" And so it wasn't a cheating thing. It was just an interesting thing, and that was my first, and a lot of people in the class's first introduction to AI generated responses to certain questions. And so we had fun with it, and then we were asking it other questions, and I'm not a genius by any means, but I was very lucky that I stumbled upon early a good way to use AI in a face-to-face class of
Mhm.
having AI generated responses and having students analyze those responses, reflect on those responses, and say what they thought was uh, right about them, wrong about them, if they were giving you actual ethical responses, stuff like that. I didn't
Right.
think of it much as more than a gimmick then. And then my second and more, this was more of a, okay, this is something we're really going to have to deal with moment, was a few semesters later. I received a response in a online course, an essay response. And first, it was formatted; it had a lot of odd capitalizations and lots of bullet points, and not like the student had typically written any essay response in the past. And so that raised the red flag. And so then the use of AI in class went from something fun and engaging to something like, okay, we're gonna be using this to cheat, and what do I need to do? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to
Yeah, this
figure
may
that
be
out? Yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So so those were two very different experiences. One was really fun, engaging. Students loved that at the end of that class, and we utilized it for the rest of the time that semester. And the other one was like, oh crap, like, okay, I really need to figure this stuff out.
Yep. What about you, Tiffany?
I was actually going to say, I bet they were using it before I realized it, is what I was going to say, because I do require 3 to 4, sometimes up to 5 writing pieces in every single one of my classes. And the online class that I teach, they have to write one every 2 weeks. And before that, it was every week. So I'm sure they were utilizing it before I knew. But I would say it was also spring of 23 or somewhere thereabouts, like right when it first came out. Um, Someone turned in something that just, and I don't even think I was using Turnitin back then. It was just submit this and we're set, because it was before the Blackboard upgrade. And I was like, this isn't right. I couldn't write this. It was that early on. It was that good, I should say. And that's when I just had to talk to him about it. But I would say it was very similar to, so
hmm
sorry, you guys, um, to what Jeremy's saying. it was like, whoa.
So just to follow up real quick, you both mentioned it was sort of a whoa moment. Did you look at the link I sent you to Cluely and the manifesto? Because that's what they're pitching, Jeremy. Just
Yep, I
and
saw it.
Tiffany,
Yes.
just for the record,
Cheat
they're
all day,
saying,
every
look,
day. Yeah.
just keep this
Yeah.
running, and then it's just going to answer for you. So
Yeah, their
you know
thought
that's
process is
creepy
like to
too.
just be ahead of the curve at this point because everybody's eventually going to cheat on everything. So might as well, like, jump the ball
Just
and be
just
there.
give up. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just
It's
go
not
there
cheating
with
if everybody does it.
right,
That's their tagline,
Well, then it
right?
becomes ethical, right? Yeah. If
Right.
everybody's doing it and that becomes the norm, then it's ethical.
Yes, I have more on that later,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So,
So
Bus-
I'm just gonna tag on to that question that Sean had asked. So, do you think the institutions were ready for everything that was going? Like, did you feel like you had the support that you needed to respond to the generative AI kind of taking over everything?
My viewpoint was that it was departmental.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of basing my reactions or my, like, hey, what are you going to do with yours sort of thing, like asking my colleagues, like, hey, I just got this. I was also brand new to the school. So I was literally in my like first or second year. So I was like, what do you guys generally do with this? So
Right.
I don't know that it was necessarily a lack of support, more so than I just didn't want to be overly punitive because I was basing it off of like I got my degree in this department. And if you cheated, which is kind of how we're looking at this, or if this is plagiarism, sort of, you got kicked out of the class. So I just didn't want to be overly punitive. I'm like, is it cool if I just give them a 0? I was very hesitant to report them for an academic integrity violation because I didn't know what they were going to do. I just assumed it would be similar. Clearly, it is not. They kind of, if you watch some of the last episodes, anyone that's watching, you'll see how Will Cooper discussed how they sort of view it over there. And a lot of us sort of deal with it before it ever gets over there.
Right.
And we use them to have a record. I don't really want to give my students to someone else to be dealt with, if that makes sense. So I was just really asking my colleagues because I wasn't sure what to do. It was kind of brand new for me, just being a newly minted college instructor coming from the high school classroom where it's treated completely differently. And I just didn't want to be overly punitive or have someone else be overly punitive with my students.
how is it treated
Yeah.
differently? You say it's
I would be
treated
curious
differently.
about that as well.
Yeah, so, and I don't want to speak too much on what I don't know because I'm not, and I was not an administrator, but I was a 12th grade English teacher for 10 years. And I was considered overly strict in my plagiarism rules because they were reflective of college and I wanted them to be prepared. I didn't realize I was not necessarily preparing them for the appropriate plagiarism issues because I didn't know this was coming down the pipeline. But it's really up to the teacher, and it's a lot of redoing for even up to full credit. And also, it's just to be noted that when schools lose a student, they lose funding. So we don't necessarily want to fail students for sure. But as much as people complain at college about how students treat AI, high schools, it's completely different. Everyone's doing it on everything. They teach college classes in high school. When I worked there, they were taking, I don't even remember what it was, philosophy or something like that. And they would bring their list of questions to my English classroom and Google everything to turn it back in. And I was like, what is happening right now? So it's just really rampant. And I don't know that I would have had the time with well over 100 plus 30 students to deal with it now. I'd probably have to
Can
make
I
them do
ask?
everything in class.
Can I ask one more follow up because you said something interesting as well, Tiffany? I want to see if Jeremy says the same. You mentioned that you didn't want to get them into trouble. And what we're talking about is we're talking about academic norms, and so it sounds like the violation of the norm doesn't raise to the point where you think immediate punitive action is necessary. So, Jeremy, is that kind of how you approached it the first time?
Well, yeah. So I try as best I can to make everything about teaching and learning more than punishment. Sometimes situations arise to the need for punitive measures, but I try to avoid that as much as possible, and I try to give students the benefit of the doubt. So typically, when and I'll go back to that initial question that spurred this conversation on. Is we have a tight knit department, and we use group therapy to always process through issues that we're having with students. And this has
Yeah.
been at the forefront of what we talk about a lot. And I think as a group, because we serve the same students in our department, I think as a group we have been good about establishing internally for us when issues are teachable moments, how we handle those, to when we get to where something of a punitive nature has to be utilized. But that's typically how I approach almost all these situations, is from a teaching perspective. And this will probably be a good segue into what we talk about later on. But that's usually how I look at this. Usually,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to jump in, then I'll let Bhaskar sort of take the lead on the transition. But Jeremy mentioned something important, and we do have students who listen to this and watch us. And I would point out that when Jeremy calls it group therapy, that really is kind of the way it works. And so you'll get the students who want to play the divorced parent game, where they assume we don't talk to each other. No, we will talk to each other. We kind of collectively, and nobody's doing it to harm anybody. What we're doing is we're trying to figure out what the best path forward is. And I think what that is it's interesting because we're collectively trying to create a new set of norms to deal with this. I mean, it's emergent, and that's a transformation that's occurring because of AI.
Which it is, yes.
So yeah.
And I agree. And like, let's move this along and kind of reframe the question and take it to the burden of detection. So if you've, like, how would you suspect somebody's been using AI in your class? Like, can you describe the steps that you usually take when you suspect somebody's misusing AI or using AI, however you want to frame that question?
you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. My first inclination is just reading the student work. I feel like I have a good handle on my students' competency from the start of the class and as we progress through the class. And when there's a major transformation between quality of work in or major difference in quality of work in one assignment versus the other, that will be one of the first things that triggers. Okay, there's something here. Some students are still new to AI. The majority of my students in my online courses are adult students, and sometimes they lag behind in integrating some of these technologies. And some students will copy and paste directly from AI with the AI formatting, and that's a big red flag right there. But typically, it's vagueness of responses. So when it's a very general response, and it doesn't get no specifics. And most of the whether it's an essay question or a discussion, and I tell the students this from the beginning of the class, I need details, I need specifics, I need to see application. Many times, if you're not proficient with prompts, your responses in generative AI will be very vague, and they won't really get to the question at hand or to the content. So it's just being perceptive of that student work. Once that happens, though, and I do have
Tiffany?
once that happens and I do have some type of idea, I just had a message come up saying I was reconnecting, so I hope I'm with you all.
I thought you had stopped.
You are now.
I took a very long pause so I could put a prompt in the ChatGPT to answer your question. I'm cheating all the time. No, I don't know where I cut off, so I can go back.
Just say it all again. No,
Gosh, right.
No, you literally you were. It sounded like you're kind of ramping up.
Okay. So. No. Okay. So I am on the university network right now, so we can blame Arkansas Tech for that, not my own home network. No. So those are the triggers. Just understanding students, knowing your students, knowing the work, and you have to have some working knowledge of generative AI to be able to use that initial eye test. Then after that, I will, and we can talk about this a little bit later. Sometimes I'll use the AI detection software just so that I have a platform to start with when I approach the student and say, there are some concerns, here's some information, let's go from here.
Okay. Tiffany, you want to jump in?
Yeah, mine is very similar. So again, I was so glad that I taught English for so long. Not that it's necessary, but I know exactly how they sound and how they speak, which they don't realize the way that they speak is generally reflected in their writing. And so I eyeball it first. I don't do very long writing assignments, so that helps as well. The minute I know this is AI, I'll just click the turn in button to see what it comes up with. I'll use other ones too, but when I feel really confident in my findings, the next thing I do is leave them a message in the feedback plus an email with the exact same message that says, hey, you got a 0 on this assignment because it was generated, at least partially, with AI software. You need to come speak to me before you can turn in another writing assignment so we can talk about academic integrity, amongst other things. And then they come see me, and that's where the sort of psychology comes into it, if you want to say that. I show them my report. I show them the information I have with no information from myself, no context. I say, this is what I've got. Why don't you tell me what's going on? And I don't say another word. And I let them fill in the blank. And they'll start out with, I didn't. And I go, well, you did. See right here. This is AI. So can you tell me about what happened? Well, and my favorite, and 3 students used it last semester there. We'll talk about this later because it comes up, but I used it to get started.
Brainstorm.
I said, get started. Can you tell me how that happened? And I just can you tell me how that happened? And so I kind of walk them into it. Most of them, 90% of them admit it just off the bat, because again, I'm not like, you're in trouble. I'm like, just tell me what happened. Tell me what your train of thought was. One time a student did it and it was pretty obvious, but they really were trying to push back. I said, cool, well, just show me the prompt you put in. Like, show me what it spit out and we'll compare the two, because they just couldn't tell me what they wrote based on, like, I copied and pasted some things from ChatGPT. I said, well, show me what's you and what's that. And they couldn't. And I said, cool, just show me what the prompt produced. And they go, well, I don't have it. I said, well, I use ChatGPT and it saved it. It saves it for you. So you could just show that to me. And they were like, I said, as a matter of fact, would you put that prompt in, show me what it spits out, and email it to me? I would love to see that. And they did. And it was great. And I learned a lot about that. So after that, I'm like, okay, you get a 0. I'm reporting you because we need to have an academic record of this. I said, but I'm not going to take it any further than that. And we can move on and you're fine. Like, you're going to get full. And I don't make any of my writing assignments enough to where it could fail a person in the class, like not even close. It's not going to be a big portion of their grade, but 9 times out of 10, they just say they did.
Well, that's interesting. If I can jump in real quick, Bhaskar, because this is something we see coming out in the interviews with faculty. There is the general concern that AI kind of facilitates cheating and plagiarism, mostly because the students are using it. And we talked about that the last time. This is just a new tool to do old kind of things, but it is new in the sense that it generates the content for you. But faculty have also mentioned that there seems to be a shift, and this is mentioned in some of the Chronicle of Higher Ed articles where they talk about a cheating vibe, that essentially what's happening is there seems to be a growing normalization of using AI, that students don't view the assignments as inherently important. So when you said you have low point value things, do you think that's part of that cheating vibe? And I'm not trying to lead, objection, Your Honor, leading the witness, but I'm not trying to lead you as much as say, this a thing too, this notion that it's part of how they learn now?
I would agree with that. My students, I think, would say that they're using AI to learn. And so this kind of leads to the last segment, but how do we talk to them about this inherent seeking of knowledge that is college, right? And so the reason I bring that up is because in an online class, if they're writing one every week and it's low stakes, I'm very clear. This has nothing to do with grammar, so you don't need Grammarly. This has nothing to do with the internet. You don't need it. You simply need to use your text and your reflective abilities. And so it's almost like a trap, because I'll say, write about your current self, your future self, this self, that self, write about yourself. And then there's no personal information. It's completely AI generated. They just didn't necessarily want to do it at all. And I'm like, but this is how you're applying the knowledge that you learned in an online class. I need to see it, right? And so I'm actually changing the way that I'm doing my writing assignments going into the fall to reflect sort of what you said. And to be fair, the 3 students I had on one assignment, it was a personal self-identity reflection assignment. Okay, you just did not need the internet. None of them were majors in our department. They were taking the class because it was an upper level and they just needed 3 hours to graduate of upper level credit hours. And they admitted that. They were like, I took this class. I had to have it to graduate. And so that's part of it too. I mean, if they're not psych majors, what do they care about lifespan? And that doesn't upset me. I don't feel disrespected. I had to take classes I didn't want to take in college as well to meet requirements. But we just talked about how this is your last semester. If you're going on to grad school, how this can be a bad setup there because they're less forgiving. And if they are going into the field, I admit that, ChatGPT is used pretty often by most people. Just be careful how you use it in case your work does care. And ended it there.
Well, and that's a good point to lead into what I want to say. You can talk about stakes as far as point value, but you can also talk about low stakes as far as life relevancy and how am I going to use this that you're making me do in the quote unquote real world. And I've noticed that for my online students, I think I'm okay making this generalization that in many ways the focus isn't on how many points this assignment is worth, is this assignment relevant to what I am currently doing or what I want to do in the future. And I work with a lot of adult students, and I'm not saying that content relevancy is more important for adult students because my 8th grader is in algebra and I always get the question, when am I ever going to use this again? So content relevancy is always important across the lifespan. But I think
all the time for the record.
Yeah, but that's if I can design graded activities that students see specific application for points in the classroom and usefulness outside of the classroom, then I raise the stakes enough that I'm hopeful that content engagement limits or at least discourages the let's plug a prompt in ChatGPT and see what it spits out and put that there. I haven't done this. Any information I would give you would be anecdotal, but the better I design assignments and the more that they are applicable across career fields for the students in my classes who are in various career fields, the less likely I am to get straight up AI generated copy and paste responses to those.
Well, part of the reason I ask about the whole vibe thing is that comes up, one, but two, if there's faculty uncertainty, because we've run the gamut, we've seen some people are going to be very, very strict and try to catch everybody, and other people throw their hands up and say, you know what, I give up, right?
Yeah.
If there's that uncertainty and the difficulty in particular in detection, which we'll kick that to that in a second, and those kinds of patterns will reinforce and normalize the use of AI, particularly even the misuse of AI. It just becomes normative for the students to use it. And when they don't know how to do it, then ultimately they get confused when they get caught up in academic misconduct. I don't know if that makes sense. But Bhaskar, how about AI detection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Detection, take it with a grain of salt. It's not 100% correct.
Yep.
Let's kind of bring this conversation over from shifting to prevention from detection. So some of our most inspiring developments we've seen are faculty shifting from detection to prevention, because I heard you mention about assignments and how useful these assignments are in real world. And again, I always feel that's like a weird double-edged sword kind of thing. How many of your assignments were useful in the real world, like now as professors, right, as teachers? And I sometimes kind of feel that this is just like a means to an end for students, so that's why they just want to get it done and get a degree and get like a 25% salary bump or something. That's pretty much what they're in it for. So maybe we can rethink detection to prevention, because you have things like Cluely that are out there that are going to help you cheat your way through everything, right?
Yeah.
So detection is pretty much out the window at this point. So, yes, sorry.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say detection also increases the workload on the faculty.
That's
right?
true as well. Yes,
that's part of the bigger issue.
Yes, we've had conversations with professors, and they're like, "We aren't here to police people. That's not a part of my job. I'm in the teaching segment of things." So, coming to my question, so which specific assignment restructuring methods would you think would work best in your experience? Are there any ways that we can improve student engagement in assignments?
When I think about this, I'm want to go to the. I'm ready to give up and say AI's here, and I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Tiffany, I'll let you go first on this one,
Okay.
and then I'll jump in. I
Yeah.
think I went first in the last one.
So, yeah, I gave a tech talk on test anxiety this semester,
Mhm.
and it really, the whole process honestly just made me think about what my objectives are. What am I doing? Why are we doing it? Does any of this matter? And if it
Right.
does, how can I convey that? So it's kind of a three-prong thing for me. So
Mm.
in class, I show them how I use ChatGPT in an academic setting because I am a graduate student right now. And I show them exactly how I use it to, as they say, get started. I don't need it to get started, but I love it for outlines. And then I don't use anything it pops up with as like references necessarily. I try to use just the library website or Google Scholar or whatever, ResearchGate. That's the first thing. I'm like, you can use it, but I'm older, wiser, and have been doing this much longer. This isn't where I expect you to be. So this is why it wouldn't be appropriate for a 400 word assignment because you're actually doing more work by doing that. So let me
Mm.
show you how I would approach this writing assignment. And I walk them through it step by step. We write it in less than 30 minutes. Their minds are blown. The other part is literally restructuring the assignment. So I like the prompts. I like what they're pertaining to, like rites of passage in adolescence going into emerging adulthood. They are emerging adulthood. I can't make this connect to them more, right? And so I asked AI or ChatGPT to AI proof my assignments. I said, make it where they can't use you to write this. And so it came up with some interesting things. It had guided questions, which I think we could do more of. So we just plop this prompt down and say, right, but
Mm.
they're not there. And that's what I mean when I mentioned my tech talk is we don't have the students we were at their
Right.
age. I
Mm.
I
Mhm.
told them whenever I want to feel superior, I just remember that I got a bachelor's degree without ChatGPT. They aren't us, right? And it's a joke. I tell them it's a joke. We have a good laugh because they know I don't know anything. Everything's over my head. I don't know what half these things mean. And so we have a good laugh about it. But I'm like, you could do that too. It literally just takes commitment and time, but mostly practice. So let me show you what I would do. So I rewrite these. I AI proof them, quote unquote. We'll see how it goes. But I added an academic integrity reminder in the instructions, which I have never done before. I just had it in my syllabus, which we all know they're not reading, right? So, like, why would I rely on that? But it reminds them they cannot use ChatGPT or Grammarly or any of those things because it would be inappropriate. I just want to know what you know. The end. Buck stops there. So they have examples on how to write it. They have guided questions to help them through each part of the prompt. And then I'm reminding them. Plus, I have a little extra credit thing where if I don't require replying to students, to other students in the class. For me, that's, as a student, that's the bane of my existence. If anyone does that, I apologize, but like, pull my teeth. Uh, I can't. It's so hard. If you want to do that for extra credit, do exactly this and you can have some extra credit on top. So, I can't force buy-in. I can't change the national climate regarding college degrees and what they're worth. I can't make a computer science major love my lifespan class, but I'm going to do my best to like hit every base that I can. And so far, I've seen student engagement go up because they feel like the prompts are more personal to them. They get to
Mm.
write about themselves, not just cited information. So we'll see. I don't know. In the end, I might have them handwrite it in class. We don't know.
That's the
I
easiest
I
solution, though,
have done
right?
that in one of my computer science classes. But
I, I
Yes.
I do that. But Jeremy, what about you?
Well, first I want to say that I don't want to throw out detection, because if I
Yeah.
think, for me at least, if you use detection as a platform or a foundation for teaching, and teaching our way through how to effectively use generative AI, then I think it's a positive. It takes time. It does. It takes time,
Yep.
and you can't use detection as your sole means for punitive measures. I don't think
Hmm.
you can.
Yeah.
I don't think
I
that's I
agree.
don't think that's ethical. It's especially when it's fairly well known that these detection tools are not very accurate, or aren't as accurate as you would want them to be.
Right.
So that
Right.
would be my first thing is, yes, we should use prevention, but I like to use that detection, even though it is time consuming, as a starting point for conversations with students about appropriate use of AI. The
Yep.
second thing is I don't think avoidance works either. And this isn't the throw my hands up, I'm not dealing with it avoidance.
No, I'm done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is avoidance and this is particularly for the online space. Avoidance is let's start doing more real time oral exams. Let's start doing this. Let's start doing that. And I think what that does, I mean, yes, those can work, but that does a disservice to your students who enroll in a fully 100% online asynchronous
Mm.
program because they have life circumstances that limit their ability to schedule an hour or 2 hours for an oral exam. I'm not making an hourly employee take time off of work either in the evening or during the day to do an oral exam because I want to make sure that no cheating is occurring in my class. So I think there are components you need to think through when you use those avoidance techniques of requiring synchronous real-time online engagement. Um, but then, as far as prevention, even before you get to assignments, I think what the at least the approach that is starting to work for me, I feel like it's working for me. No, again, anecdotal, no research in my specific classes on this. Um, is you have to even in the online space, it's easier face to face, but even in the online space you have to lean on those social components of learning, and you have to lean on faith in humanity and that we want to be decent to our fellow human beings. And the way you do that, I know some folks, and I'm not disparaging this, some folks do the written contracts, like you're going to do a test in Blackboard that says yes I won't cheat, yes I won't cheat, yes, those things that can work, that's fine. But I find that when students connect to you as a professor and they connect to their fellow students, which is more difficult, but it's still possible, through some kind of asynchronous posted video, whether it be Kaltura or some other means, where I will do an introductory video into this is your appropriate use of AI. And I will basically speak to students in these are academic reasons why you need to use it within the confines of the course. These are the social reasons why you have an obligation to meet these standards and these
Mm.
norms in the class. And I try to get them to connect to me so that if they're using AI, they are disappointing or they're breaking these norms that we set, that their professor set. So it's building that connection so that the student wants to do their best in your class. It doesn't work perfect, and there are some people who
Right.
see this as very transactional. Give me the grade, I'll take this degree, I'll go get my pay increase. But we do have a lot of students who uh, connect with you and they don't want to disappoint you and they don't want to
I
disappoint each
agree.
other. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
building that social connection, even in the online space, which it is possible to do, goes a long way in preventing use of AI or inappropriate use of AI before you even get to how you build your assignments, if that makes sense.
But
Yeah.
all right, I want to follow up on that because what you're talking about is backed by a whole lot of theory. It really is. The notion that you build pro-social norms, you build human
Yep.
relationships,
Yep.
that will cause people to desist from certain kinds of behavior. And not only
Mm-hmm.
that, if they're given the choice between deviant or non-deviant and they don't understand the difference, you can help them
Correct.
understand the
Yep.
correct way to use AI, for
Yep.
instance, as long as you
Yep.
build those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question that many professors aren't going to like, but this is a thing I stumble into as I read, and you've touched on it, and that is very simply, have we gotten lazy as the professoriate, and have we become more transactional in the way that the students have become transactional because we aren't doing that work as well? We aren't sort of conveying the normative. We just say, look, don't plagiarize. We don't explain why not to plagiarize. We say, don't use AI. We don't explain why you shouldn't use AI, and we don't value knowledge in the same way. Is that what's going on?
Well, I can tell you in the and this isn't judging
I made
uh,
Tiffany
well
uncomfortable, I can tell.
this isn't judging my colleagues here at this institution or others, but in
Right.
the online space, especially for courses that my graduate courses tend to have around between 20 and 25 students in them, which is insane and
It's
very
a lot.
difficult to manage.
Mm.
You can't have graduate courses that online that are turnkey where you turn on
Right.
Blackboard,
Right,
read a chapter, take a test. I mean, you could, but
Yep.
the
right.
students aren't getting the value, and graduate students will by and large call you out for why am I here, why am I doing this, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
totally
but
transactional.
Yeah.
in the online space there's a tendency to have a turnkey course where students go in, read a chapter, take a test, answer a discussion, maybe not respond to classmates, you go week to week to week to week. If I have my full 15-week course built out, which I usually do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a turnkey course, I can start it up and especially if I have auto-graded assignments, I can turn it on at the beginning of the semester. I can turn it off at the end of the semester, and I'm done. That goes against almost every tenet of effective online learning or pretty much effective anything. But you do see that.
Anything.
You do see that. And that if that's the effort that the faculty puts in on the front end, then I would expect that students would use ChatGPT and put a similar effort in on their end. So I do think that you can say that that this work to dissuade students from using AI requires an investment of our time, our emotional energy.
Yeah.
Tiffany, I think you said something earlier about not taking it personally. I do take it
Yep.
personally. Usually, when I feel like I take it personally when I feel like my intelligence is being insulted. Because when someone submits, I'm like,
Right.
you have to think that I'm an idiot to believe that is not AI use. So like that's usually, it's not like, oh, you're disappointing me, you've broken social norms. It's like, you think I'm dumb. You think I'm.
But Jeremy, they do think they're smarter than us.
And it's just like, don't do that. Don't
They
think I'm
already
dumb.
think that. They're like, I could use this, do it in a quarter of the time. Who's dumber, you or me? And I'm like, don't listen. But that brings me to the point that you brought up and that Sean brought up. And the reason I keep bringing it back is I don't think professors are lazy per se. What I would say is, and I'm an instructor, but you can lump me in that group. Do you remember the way we used to teach online courses where stuff would just copy over?
Mhm.
Literally, we didn't have to change
Yeah.
dates. And I remember reading those prompts, which were generated from like the instructor materials or whatever. And my second or third semester teaching as an adjunct, I rewrote them all because I was like, this isn't going to work. But again, I do think we are teaching in a time where major change has to happen. So that's not a personal issue. It's like, it's not a work ethic issue. It's teaching teaching a certain way in the wrong time. Okay.
Mhm.
So we can't teach the way we used to teach anymore, which was fairly hands off. This gig was fairly good because, again, comparing it to being a high school teacher, apples and oranges. They're just different. It's just a different workload. It's just a different, for a lot of people, the way that they are either attached or committed, the level of not effort, but like commitment, I guess, is kind of what Jeremy was saying, right? Like if we're not committed, why would they be committed? But we're teaching a different time, and it does have to lend itself a little bit more to high school type language. And what I mean by that is, hey, here's how you use ChatGPT or don't. This is why it matters. And you really have to like put in that front end loading, like Jeremy was saying. That's a high school term, front end loading, right? We're taught to do that in education school. So again, I think it's just change that's really uncomfortable and doing things completely differently than when like I was in college, for instance, where it was very much you're out. Bye.
Well, I think you're onto something. This is why I ask, because it seems that we're doing more work on the back end with detection. Detection's a lot more work, when it seems the proactive work and just getting more engaged and doing that stuff on the front end actually saves us time on the back end. It's like when my kid spends 3 hours complaining about mowing the lawn when it would have only taken him an hour to mow the lawn, right? It seems to be sort of the same thing. And the resistance, and this gets back to Bhaskar's question, which is, what are you doing in terms of restructuring? That's proactive. That's being sort of anticipatory and trying to fix it on the front end. So if you design assignments differently, that's a lot of work, but I don't think it's as much work as it is just trying to catch everybody.
And it saves emotional trauma as well, having that conversation.
And that's the cultural shift that I think faculty are having trouble reconciling. Is, we do it this way, but no, we do it this way. And there is a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Just to be honest, I've experienced it myself, where it's kind of like, yeah, okay, all right, fine. This one's fine. And the second you're permissive, you've saved yourself some work, but you've created that permissive environment for some sort of AI use, right? So
and you got to think about how you enjoy, as an individual faculty, what do you enjoy spending your time doing? And for me, I much prefer spending my time engaging with students, creating that social connection, than I do taking stuff and looking at every A to I detector I can to find to get a whatever numeric value I've set as my benchmark for this is unacceptable. Like, I don't want to spend hours a day doing that.
Right.
Well, they're telling us what they need too. I'm so sorry, Bhaskar.
No, you go for it.
They're telling us what they need. In one semester on one assignment, I pointed at my chair because that's where they sit to talk to me. all three of them told me they weren't sure how to get started. So I said, do you mean like a thesis statement? Like, what do you mean? Like the first sentence? They go, yeah. I went, okay. So this fall, every single writing assignment, I'm going to teach them how to write. They don't need it, but whatever. The thesis statement for each of those assignments, how to literally pick out the words from the prompt to create a sentence that is just the map for your whole paper. Why push against that and assume they got it in comp when they either didn't or they forgot? So why not just help them out so that they don't go to that for that exact thing? I'd much prefer to do a thesis statement, a 10-minute thesis statement lesson than deal with that again.
Right. Well, we tend to silo too, right? We say, well, that's the English department. When in many respects, we're confronted with the fact that it may be all of us at this point. Yeah. Because they're relying on AI to do it. And in fairness, I think the English faculty is teaching them this.
Yeah.
But it's, we have leaky vessels, that Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and the whole notion that our heads leak. I mean, that's not how he puts it. He's far more eloquent. But that notion that our memories are imperfect, and that may be something they don't think is relevant, and it's something that just flies through their head, right? And so maybe we have to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We had a tech talk, Sean and I, we were talking to everybody over there. And generally in my classes, I let them know that, whatever I'm going to teach them is available online, right? It's the information age. So if you're motivated to get the information, you can get it from anywhere. So why are you in class? Why are you listening to me? And I encourage you to ask those questions as well, because the answers that you're going to get are very interesting, because they really appreciate the passion that you bring in, the effort that you're bringing in, the way you're talking to them. It's just a wonderful thing to hear from them, because these are aspects that we never consider as teachers. I mean, these are the social aspects and these social cues that we get from them. And, this is just, I think it'd be a wonderful, study to kind of do, to try to figure out what do students get from teachers that they're not getting from ChatGPT.
We could dig in on that.
I think that would be a wonderful thing to kind of.
We could do that. And I would say that not to jump in, but I would say that I think that's true. And we got to be careful, because there's this line we have to walk where we do this not just for the money.
Oh,
yeah.
Now I want to be very clear. A big part of it is the money, right? And it's not big money, just for the record either, because people in positions of power and authority will say, well, you get all these added benefits. We don't have to pay you as much. That's a lot. We want to be paid. But at the same time, being a professor in particular is one of those, it's a job where you become, for the most part, more ethically good, because you're really doing good in the world. And so the question is, when you make it transactional, do you lose that? So getting back to the ethics, et cetera, I think that's what happens. You're making it transactional. Look, just show up, check all these boxes on a multiple choice exam. I'm going to run it through a machine. Or, now we're going to be upset over AI use, but we're going to do these other things that are really sort of cheating on our side. I mean, that's what all this reading has done for me, is it's forced me to rethink the pedagogy more
100%.
broadly.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah.
And then see if it's, in some respects, this is going to influence my teaching philosophy. I mean, would you guys say the same thing?
I literally wrote that down to your question about overall teaching philosophy. Like, yes, definitely. It's making me pause and consider my objectives when I create these assignments and what I truly want the outcome to be. I kind of got off my high school train and jumped to the other track, which my track is 2005, 2009. When I was an undergrad, right? And that was a very long time ago. And
I was one of her professors, by the way, just for the record.
My 20th reunion is this summer. And it's made me think a lot. And so I'm actually hopeful I'll be able to utilize ChatGPT or AI in my classroom in the future. And I'm always moving toward that. I think I'm going to let them kind of show me the way at first, especially in my upper level classes, and see where it goes and what kind of do semester to semester. But I do trust them. Not to not use ChatGPT, but their honesty is, Gen Z is the most honest to their, maybe to their detriment, generation I've ever experienced. They'll come in my office and say, well, I transferred here and I had to use ChatGPT on everything in my old school because I didn't feel like anyone was teaching me anything. And I'm like, that is such a large bag to unpack. I don't have time for all of that. But let me talk to you about us and me and you and ATU and
Right,
your
right,
future. And so they'll tell you anything,
Well,
including when they cheat.
well, I
right.
want to because I had trust written down as a component of
Hmm.
my response to almost every one of the questions that we were given, and
Yeah.
that to me, I teach a lot in leadership and leadership development. Trust is foundational throughout all of that, and I think trust is
Hmm.
foundational for what we're talking about as well. We need to offer students trust, even really before they've earned it,
Earned it. Yeah.
to build that social connection and that social capital, and then they need to trust us, and that's why I think
Hmm.
using these detection programs more as a teaching
Hmm.
tool versus a punitive tool builds trust, and it builds
Hmm.
that social connection. And I think um, that's, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and we can come back to it, but I think that's what maybe is one of the keys to preparing faculty for changing their pedagogy, for approaching generative AI in a different way, is helping folks understand how to build that trust, because I think that trust speaks to prevention, and that trust is going to limit the use of AI, and then that hopefully will make the AI detection piece a very, very, very minimal part of what our. I don't think that goes away as the punitive piece,
Yeah.
but it makes it more of a minimal part of what our day to day is like.
So, Jeremy, do
I
you think, just following up on that, sorry, Sean.
Yeah, no, go
So,
ahead.
yeah, just following up on that, do you think specific institutional or policy clarifications are required for that? Do you think this needs to be written down, or do you think this is a more personal thing in their
Well, I think
classes?
so. We've had a few professional development opportunities with faculty. Like, this is what I do in my class. This is what I do in my class. This is how you do this. But in some ways, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think I would enjoy,
Hmm.
and again, this is speaking for me only. I haven't polled our faculty here and said, would you enjoy this? But I would enjoy professional development opportunities where we either heard from an expert or we engaged in cross-disciplinary conversations about
Yeah.
ways in which we build trust with our students and ways in which we build social connection with our students, specifically with looking through a lens of generative AI and what trust means as far as use of generative AI, teaching students how to use it ethically, how to prevent misuse or unethical use of it. And I think, to me,
Mm.
that helps. And then when you look at rebuilding your courses or re-examining your approach and making these small or transformational changes in how you approach this thing that we do, you're approaching it not from a place of I'm going to stop cheating, I'm going to catch all these
Mm,
cheaters. You're approaching it from a
Yeah.
space of this is going to help me connect even more with our students. And Sean had talked about
mm,
yes, we get paid, and I want to get paid for my labor. I don't want to I don't necessarily want to do uncompensated work, but I also didn't get into this profession to become a gazillionaire. I got into
Right.
this
Hmm.
profession because of what it means and what it means to connect with
mm,
students and what it means to help students reach their goals. There's this concept of that we live in the gap. There's the person we are, and there's the person that we aspire to be. I love being in that gap with students and helping them get to the
Right.
what they aspire to
mm,
be, and trust is paramount in that whole process.
mm.
Well, I think you've given me an idea, and Bhaskar and I will talk about this, particularly through the task force, and that is it may be important for us because we're having the very conversation that you're saying we need to have more broadly right now. Is we may want to offer an opportunity for some kind of boot camp where we
Right.
rethink pedagogy and
Hmm.
we have these conversations about trust. And what you said really struck with me, mostly because we live in a time of institutional erosion and mistrust.
Hmm.
We don't even trust science anymore. We don't trust things that we know historically have worked. And higher ed is one of those things that's losing its sort of ground in terms of institutional trust. And it's natural then, in the face of that, coupled with this radical transformation in technology, we're all going to freak out a little bit, right? And the easiest solution in that cultural context, I'm not trying to be too sociological here, but the easiest solution then is just to go along and use the tool. And
Hmm.
so it's incumbent upon us at that point in time to take a step back and say, all right, let's critically assess the tool and let's critically assess what we do with that tool to try to recapture some of the things that build trust.
Right.
because transactional relationships are by default untrustworthy. You can only
Yeah.
trust the extent to which you understand the other person's motives and desires for being in that transaction. And if the goal is just to get a sheet of paper, the paper itself becomes valueless, right? Because it's just, you're buying it. I know we're kind of wandering, but I think that's the issue. So
I agree.
I don't know, Bhaskar, what do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah.
I think Jeremy and Tiffany have stumbled into something amazing.
Yes.
Well, that's why we have these conversations, right?
It's the
And,
two. It's the
like,
two minds that you invited together. That's what it was. It's the two
That's
guests.
what
That's right.
magic.
That's true.
So that kind of leads us then to mentorship and meaningful learning, which is what we've dancing around,
Right.
and
Yep.
successfully. Have you ever, just as a side note, have you ever caught anybody using AI and it turns out they didn't use AI? What's the dilemma there? And then how do you guide people? We've talked a little bit about that. So
Yeah.
what do we think? I mean, where are we left?
In the spring semester in upper division classes, not every time, but I guess it was 2 out of the 4 times we had a writing assignment, this one student's stuff came up as like 100% AI. And I'm reading it and I'm like, I mean, I guess that one sentence, maybe that, but like not even 25% could have been AI. So I followed my regular protocol and said, hey, just come see me. So she comes in, we look at it, and she's telling me how she wrote it, her sources, this, and that. I'm like, I agree with you, actually. I brought you in mostly to warn you because I actually don't believe that you used AI. This sounds like you. I've had her in multiple classes. She's a very intelligent young lady. I said, but if this happened once and now twice, I do worry that it could happen to you in graduate school. And I know that's where you're wanting to go. I said, I personally can't give you any more information than I have. Like, I ran it through multiple detectors. It said it was AI. I don't agree with that. I don't think any of this is AI. I think she sat down in a Word document and typed it. So I can't explain that. I said, but it might be worth um, investigating this with OIS. I know that's kind of an offshoot. I said, but other than that, all Turnitin is going to say is, we mess up. You shouldn't use it as a detection, whatever. And I said, to be fair, it isn't. It's not for that. It's actually for originality. So I'm just warning you on the front end. I don't know how to fix this, but you can use me in the future. I was like, if this happens to you again in another class, say, hey, if you don't mind, I'll have Miss Nance contact you, or you can contact Miss Nance. This happened to me. She can vouch for me, and I will do that for you. I'd be happy to. So it did happen, like I said, but it's only been twice, I guess, in the last 3 years that it occurred. But it did happen this spring twice with one student. And again, if you read it, you'd know it wasn't AI either. So I'm just trying to be there for her and warn her, just in case someone else is very, they have a lot of zeal for Turnitin.
And I think that's the right way to go about it, because a lot of professors would just, wave the wand and be like, well, this is AI.
Yeah.
And then the student has to, deal with the brunt of it. And
You go to jail.
Go to jail.
Well, I was on TikTok whenever it happened to that young lady at, I don't know, like FSU or something. And she, these are big universities. There's thousands, hundreds, whatever, the number of students.
More.
And they were like, I'm not willing to do this with you. So Turnitin, or Grammarly, probably Grammarly, ends up creating that little button you can toggle at the bottom, which is like review. And so the professor can see us, can watch you. Okay. It was because of her. And I remember thinking, that is terrible, but I guess you can't really know your students when there's that many potentially.
Yeah.
And so I would hate to do that. It changed her graduation timeline.
That's crazy.
Earlier iterations of AI detection would detect proficient writing as AI generated. So that my first experience with AI detection was I took a snippet from my dissertation, which I completed in 2011, and stuck it in there, and it was 100% AI generated. So I was way ahead of my time in cheating. I was cheating back in 2010.
You were cheating without knowing
2010,
it.
2011, I was using generative AI.
Right.
But yeah,
You're a wizard.
so that
maybe you did start Clue.
Oh, I could have.
You just didn't know it.
I'm a secret investor in them now. But that was. I'm glad I did that, because that was my first inclination. Like, okay, I can't use this as the end all be all determining factor in AI usage, and so that made me skeptical early on. And so I think that's when I immediately decided this isn't going to be punitive. I'm going to use detection a little bit different. And again, eventually you do have to get the punitive if someone's copying and pasting and they refuse to engage with you in any kind of meaningful dialogue to get them from where they are to where they need to be with generative AI use. Then eventually there has to be punitive stuff. But I had a student I worked with this semester who and I don't necessarily confront them with AI
That's what
use.
I wrote
I
too.
approach them about
I don't
it,
confront.
and I'll say that your writing was produce this score in from these AI detection tools, and so I'll let them know this is where I'm getting it from. I'll send them the screenshot of that, and then right after that, I will say, please email me or contact me. Usually it's an online that this happens. Uh, I'll tell them ways to contact me so we can engage in a conversation about what happened. Most of the students, and this is again, I'm sorry to keep saying trust, but this is what building trust with your students can do on the front end. I'll have a lot of students who will email me and they will tell me what life circumstance is going on at that moment.
Right.
It's more than what I ever really want or need to know, and they'll tell me what's going on there, and they said I fell short and I shouldn't have. What can we do? And we'll go over ways
Yep.
to get those points. But if students don't perceive you as a human being or a caring human being, they might not
Mhm.
engage in that dialogue with you. But that's typically what happens. I had a student this semester who was like, I did not use AI at all, not to not to start, not to outline, not to do anything. And so that created a semester long. For that assignment, it was like, okay, fine, you've engaged with me, we've talked about this, I'm going to go ahead and award you the points that I would award if this was written by you. Take AI out of the conversation. But that created a semester long conversation back and forth with myself and the student, where prior to them submitting their assignment, they would or any writing activity, they would send it to me and they would run it through generative AI, checking on their own, and we'd go back and forth about the scores they got and why they might have received those scores. So it was really a learning opportunity for both of us. Fortunately, I haven't been in a situation where it's like the student doesn't respond back to me. I'm like, no, this is AI, you get a 0. And then later on, they come back and say, so I haven't had that situation where it's been confrontational. But I think,
You're lucky.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and so,
Not yet. Not
no,
yet.
but I do think it takes a lot of work, but I do think when you limit the confrontation at the beginning, then you
Yeah.
diminish the
Yeah.
possibility of confrontation through that process. And I don't really want it to
Well, I
be that
think
way unless someone's legitimately cheating. But when they
Yeah.
do, they usually don't respond back to you and they just kind of ignore it and they'll get their 0.
Oh,
And
I have the
yeah,
opposite experience. They come in and tell me
no.
they used it, and I'm like, well, thanks so much, I think.
well, a lot of this is bearing out with what Will talked about in the last episode. And he said it's the relationship, and then it's the conversation, and you work it out on the front end. And what I'm picking up, Bhaskar, and I'll pitch it to you, but is this, we got to get beyond policing, like you say, we got to
Right.
get beyond detection. We need to understand why the students misuse AI. I think part of that's going to be they just don't know
They
better.
just don't know.
Some of it could be life situation, workload, lack of skills or confidence, perceiving the assignments as busy work. The notion of grade pressure could be normalizing its use, like everybody uses it, so
Yeah,
why not? Could be unclear expectations, could be any number of things,
Yeah.
right?
they
But
vary.
the more we understand that, the more we can get to institutional change, and particularly what the task force can do, because I'm getting the sense that this should be multi-pronged with some of the pedagogical stuff, the what we measure
Yeah.
in terms of assessments, the trust and integrity that we keep talking about, and then providing support. And what I'm hearing from our colleagues here is that that's what
Yeah.
we're kind of already doing informally. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
and so I guess that leads us to things like institutional change, wouldn't you say?
Right, absolutely. I'm all for that. I think like AI is a big disruptor at this point. And again, like I keep saying, AI has kind of affected higher education a little unfairly than other
Yeah,
industries, I want to say. Yeah, but
yeah,
I
Yeah.
mean, but yeah, we're all professors over here. We've been doing this for the longest, and we can always pivot. Tools have come, and tools will go, but we'll go on forever, kind of thing. And I'm sure we can come up with a way that we can change assignments, change the way that we are teaching, and I think it's possible. I think it's pretty possible if we have those conversations, though. And again, if we start siloing ourselves, that's where the issues come up. I think we just need to human a little bit more and just keep talking.
yeah.
People need to people. Now, you had a couple of questions about the institutional supports, right? Relative to the
Right.
whole task force. So
I did ask
we'll bring
Jeremy.
it back and ground it,
Right, I did ask Jeremy about that, and you were saying a few things about it, but and I'd open this up to Jeremy and Tiffany. So, what would your visions be of how how the institution could sustain this academic integrity in the age of AI?
I don't know if they can. I don't.
I'm
I
done.
That's it, everybody.
I'm out.
Done.
I don't know if they
Bye.
can.
See you
Because
next time.
well, that's the thing. This is an onion, and they
Right.
are the outer layer. I guess the students the inner layer, society's the inner layer. I don't know. The
Well,
viewpoint
society
of
would be
all
the
of
outer
this.
layer.
Well, you would think, right? But like everything, I say everything we do is based on a little bit, at least, culture, society, expectations, whatever. And I think you'll find that when you ask them about why they use AI, there isn't necessarily that tie that we had to how we're being viewed as a society, because it's a Gen Z thing, right? They have the internet, they have Snapchat, they're the main character, this, and that. And
Mhm.
I just wonder, I don't think there is a one size fits all, especially if you're going to leave it up to faculty to decide how they're going to utilize it. I guess I would just want them to be there when I need them as backup. I don't know if that even
So,
makes sense.
what do you think, Jeremy? No, it makes sense.
Yes.
I think it leads to another kind of question, but let's let Jeremy weigh in.
Well, I think we all agree that across the board, regardless of discipline, regardless of course, that passing off generative AI work as one's own is not acceptable. Like I can't
Right.
I
think
agree.
of any situation in which someone would say, put a prompt in there, take it, place it for your assignment, no reflection, no analysis. That's it. Like to me,
Right.
so we have
No learning's
yeah.
occurring. I mean,
So
it's
I
just
think we can all agree on that. But outside of that, there are varying levels of acceptable AI use according to assignment, according to discipline, course, faculty, all that other kind of stuff. So I think it's hard to
Yeah.
set institutional norms of acceptable AI use outside of straight up copy paste, a traditional view of like the lowest level of plagiarism. Again, I think, and I'll go off of what Tiffany was saying, it's almost, I don't need the institution to set standards because it's going to be different and it's going to be diverse uses of AI, but we need the institution for support. What that looks like, I don't really know. If we're now determined that our job, especially in certain disciplines, is to not just teach students content, but teach students the acceptable use of tools and the effective use of tools within our disciplines, then students need access to those tools. And I think in previous episodes, you've had other faculty talk about the institution needs to have
right.
make the access to generative AI more equitable.
Mm-hmm.
We also, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we need to have. I think we talked about English proficiency and writing proficiency. We need some standards of AI proficiency and getting our students up to those standards. But all of that requires professional development for the people to help us people be people in the face-to-face and online space. We need professional development in how to use AI tools. I think we need professional development for those faculty who want to just say, nope, we're going to avoid AI completely.
Yeah.
I don't like to make value judgments on that. You can make a valid argument for why in specific courses AI has no place at all, and we need support for those faculty as well. What that looks like, I would rather leave it up to like I can help you with the pedagogical stuff, the technology, and I'm very much a novice there, and what types of support people would need to better utilize various generative AI technologies, whether it's faculty or teachers. But and again, this will go back to trust, knowing that the institution has those support pieces in place, and knowing that if you do get to a point where a student has to have some type of punitive outcome, I think I left off a syllable, they have to have that a negative outcome, that the institution has clear enough procedures that we follow so that we're approaching this all. Once we get to the point where it goes outside of the classroom and we're involving academic integrity or involving academic affairs, there is a very well-defined process with timeline, and that timeline is followed so that we're treating people fairly, so that if Sean submits a student to academic affairs, that student is dealt with completely differently than if I do it. Like that there needs to be some kind of standardized policies and procedures there, so that faculty know, okay, I'm not handling this. This hasn't been handled, or this hasn't been resolved within the confines of my classroom. So here's the process.
Well,
So
go ahead.
go ahead, Tiffany. I was
Well,
going to.
I was going to say, I might add that we are talking a little bit about how we do work to live, and pay is interesting in higher ed. I think it would be really cool if departmentally, whatever your department does and doesn't allow, requires and doesn't require. I know for me, it's writing is the issue, right? Pay me just like a nominal amount, pay me anything to run a writing lab for the behavioral sciences department. I can't put myself out there any more than I already am for the things that I've decided to do on my own without pay and all of those things. Another hour, I don't know that I have at this point, but especially being a graduate student, but I want to be there to walk them through the process. Now my students can come to my office and get that sort of treatment, but I would like to affect it on a bigger level than that. If we're saying as a department, we don't like this and we don't want it, let's teach them to our standards, to our expectations, the way that I was taught when we had less students and more time. And so I think if you even had like departmental expectations, which would be tough, I think, across all faculty, but if you did and you were teaching them the way you wanted it to go, even better. And I would love to do that, but it's just really hard. I don't want to sign up for something and then do it forever for free.
Right. Well, and for people who are non-academics, that's what tends to happen. It's really more of a lifestyle than it is anything else. And, the old saying, being an academic is great because you can work any 70 hours a week you want. Right. So everybody thinks they see us at the grocery store at noon. They think we're goofing off. And that is not what's happening, just for the record.
We have something that night.
That's the only time we have free before we're going and running labs and doing all these other things.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I love when people comment to me that I don't work over the summer. I'm like, I do work. It's just uncompensated most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just for free.
We're all here. We're all here off contract doing this right now.
Right?
Here we are.
I was not paid to appear in this podcast.
I'm working on my fall classes. So.
Right. Already.
Yes.
So, but what I'm hearing in terms of policy then, and I'm picking on mostly Jeremy here, because for those of you who don't know, Jeremy and I are writing partners. We've written how many policies? We've written pretty much.
Unfortunately, we don't write
all
movies.
the major policies.
We should
together.
have started writing
Usually,
movies.
if there's a policy, it's either me or Jeremy or both of us that come in, depending on the level of emergency it is. But at the university level, I'm hearing different levels of policy, Jeremy. So tell me if I'm wrong. At the university level, it's going to be something very, very broad that says every class or every professor should have an AI policy in their syllabus. Sure. Like that's as specific as it can get, because you need to preserve academic freedom. Based on what Tiffany's saying, a policy at the university level might look like all departments should create disciplinary standards on AI use that can be conveyed to students in the class, right? And then at the class level, each class could pick, you can use AI or not. If you're going to use AI, this is what it's going to look like. And then maybe even run things at the departmental level in terms of, all right, this is what we consider to be acceptable and unacceptable use. And that's reflected at the departmental level. Does that sound like an appropriate order of operations for a policy? What do you think?
Be nice for consistency for them.
Right. I mean, you can't write one policy that fits everything.
Right.
But even departmentally is nice.
Right. But you could say you have to have a policy. That's the policy, is you have to have a policy, right? Is that, what do you think, Jeremy?
Well, I don't think I do think there are various interpretations of academic freedom per institution. We're actually very open as far as our academic freedom policies. I've been at other institutions and talked to other faculty where academic freedom is here's the textbook you're using in your course, the assignments you develop from this textbook, that's your academic freedom. That's not at all. But I do think that we're not stepping on academic freedom if we say every faculty has to have a generative AI policy in the course, and we're not dictating what that is.
Agreed.
But we're saying there has to be some kind.
It could be no.
It could be
zero. It could
AI,
be no.
But just mention it in your syllabus.
We have that now, don't we?
There's a
it's
broad
like ABC.
framework.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like easy.
I think we probably should revisit that. I don't know
Yeah,
what you
I'm
think,
using it in my
Bhaskar.
syllabi.
Okay. Based off of
So
conversations, I think yes, we need to rethink the.
But I
yeah,
know when we had a conversation within our full department, we had faculty who were unaware that there were that wording was given to us to select from.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think it's widely. It might not be widely known that there is this wording out there, and I definitely don't think it's everyone needs to have a specific generative AI policy in their syllabus. To me, I would feel
I don't
comfortable
know.
with the institution saying, "Here's the everyone has to have a policy in the syllabus," and then the the any steps or procedures that we have for reporting either continued use of AI or AI outside of the policy, that be where we have more of our specific applies across the board to everyone kind of thing.
right.
What procedures we follow when we determine that this student needs to be reported. Um, but even I think even within departments, you can have uh, myself and one of my colleagues might have various views on AI, and even if we teach the
Mm.
same exact course, I might be open to usage in certain areas where my colleague might not be, and I wouldn't want to tell that person, oh well, you really need to be open to it. Whereas in other
Hmm.
disciplines, if you're in computer science, maybe if someone says absolutely no discussion of AI, you're like, well, that's let's talk about it.
That's the point.
Yeah. So
That's what's happening.
yeah. So I know there are those differences too. But if for my discipline and what we do, I think someone could justify that we're not touching AI, we're not doing it, and I'm going to use these
Mm.
Right.
AI detection things, and they're going to get in trouble.
Well, I think well,
Yeah.
English and some of the other creative
Right.
disciplines in particular, it could be.
Yeah.
So, well, we're kind of hitting a
Yeah.
long episode because we've
Mm-hmm.
got two guests and they've been awesome.
They have
What
been.
did I don't think we've solved anything, but we've had an awesome discussion,
We
right?
did have
What
an awesome discussion.
do
We
we
asked
have
more
any kind
questions.
of? That's right. Do we have any final thoughts or anything from Jeremy and Tiffany?
I would just say we can like them, and that's okay. Our students are awesome, and I think it just harkens back to that old sort of viewpoint where the professor stood at the podium and they had all the knowledge and you had to get everything from them, and it might be on the
Mm.
test and it might not. We're not really sure what's going on, but we just really want to pass this class, so we work extra hard and we go see them in their office and we do this and that. Sort of all of that's been removed, so we kind of have to put it ourselves out there, and we kind of have to get to know them.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind
Mm-hmm.
of weird when I say it out loud because it's sort of natural for me, but like just as a teacher, but I think we have to change the way, not only that we view them, how we respect them, and how it doesn't have, like you mentioned, Sean, it doesn't have to be, or maybe it was Jeremy, it doesn't have to be earned. We just, as human
Mm.
beings, have these things that we do and care about, and just always tie it back to what we do. Because my students have said, as Jeremy mentioned, that in every eval I have, they can tell I'm excited to be teaching that
Mm-hmm.
day. Like, I'm really excited about what we're talking about. And they go, and she'll tell us she's not, but she looks like she is. And so, like, when we talk about, bio or whatever, in Gen Psych, they're like, but she looks like she is. And so I think they can tell. They just can tell when you care. And that goes, like, as Jeremy mentioned, it just goes a really long way for them not
It
to do that.
does.
But online can be
Mm-hmm.
tough because they don't know you the same way.
But
Right.
it's harder, but you can get there, and that's when
Yeah.
I just looked at my evals, so they just came out yesterday, and I'm always looking for the comments that reference some kind of personal connection that the online students have, either with their colleagues or with me. It doesn't really, I don't care which, as long as they're feeling like they're not a number and a computer screen and there's no interaction. But I think, and I face to face or online, when we had that question, everything we talk about you can find online. So why are you here? And they're I think they're
Mm-hmm.
here. Yes, they're here to get the piece of paper. Yes, they're here to get a job or to move up in their career. Yes, I don't discount that, but I think they're also here for that personal connection. And maybe if you're really, 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 really good at writing prompts for generative AI, you can get into the weeds and you can apply content that's very specific to your individual context. But that's what we help them do. That's that
Mm-hmm.
conversation and that dialogue, and you can have those online, like you can. So when people, if anyone's listening to this, I don't want them to be like, oh, that's only for face to face. No, you can do this kind of stuff online. Um, I don't like it a lot when academics are like, well, this is what I research, but this is what I research. I research engagement in the online space. You can do these things. But
Yeah.
they engagement for students online is like Brussels sprouts. They
Yeah.
know it's good for them, but it's hard to get them to do it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But within, I do research on perceptions of engagement. What students want, in my research is a connection with faculty, and that's why they're here. They don't
Hmm.
want connection with ChatGPT. They don't want connection with generative AI. They want
Right.
connection with us.
Mm.
Connection with their fellow students. That's a good sidebar. They like that too sometimes, but they almost
Mm.
always want that connection with us, and that's why they're there. So that's where our space is. It's the people. Us people need to people. We need to connect with those
Yeah.
Yeah.
students. We need to work with them, and we need to teach them the ways that we think, based on our disciplines, how they can use this fun generative AI to be better people, to be better employees, to be better partners, to be just, we're in that gap. We live in the gap. We're in that gap,
Mhm.
getting them to the person they want to be. And I think that
Well, we
we
know
can't lose
from
sight of that.
retention efforts that
Hmm.
faculty are why students come here and
Yeah.
why they stay here.
Absolutely.
Right. It's what's value added, even
Yeah.
Hmm.
online. It's what's value added,
Yep.
and that's we've had other conversations, Bhaskar and I, about there's this creepy sense that we may be turning more toward the AIs to build personal relationships. I think I read something the other day where Zuckerberg says, because there is an epidemic of loneliness, and that's a whole separate
Mm.
conversation. But Zuckerberg wants to fill that gap with AIs and avatars, and I just think that becomes so artificial that we lose something about who we are. So
Hmm.
that people are peopling.
Mm.
We've got to avoid that, and that's what I'm hearing from both of you is that
Yeah.
that's the value add. And Bhaskar
All right.
mentioned it about his students. That's the value added is
Mm.
that interactive component. And the reason I kind of dwell on that is I think that's what makes us still relevant in the face of
Mhm.
AI. That
Yeah.
that AI does not replace
Mm-mm.
the faculty, but
Yep.
faculty that use AI may replace faculty who don't over
I
the
think that's
long
a good way to
term, and
look at
that's
that.
why
Yeah.
we
Yeah, that's one way of
and
looking at it. Mm.
That's right.
that's why we have to get our heads around it.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I just remembered. I asked Angela where people have people aren't peopling came from. She was the one who mentioned it to me, but she heard it at a librarian conference where they were talking about AI. So I'm trying to track down who actually said it, so we could appropriately
There you
cite
go.
this librarian.
That's true.
But
That's important.
because it's becoming a
It's
mantra.
catching on.
Well, I want a shirt. I want a shirt that says I'm busy peopling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you already got your
Yep.
hat,
I do.
right?
I have it. I have it on display. I didn't wear it.
Everybody who
Right.
comes on
Perfect.
gets a hat.
Yes,
So
yes, they do. Well, thank you
good.
so much. This was wonderful. I think this was a wonderful conversation.
I agree.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking time to share your views on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yep.
having
Thank
us.
you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
absolutely. See
We'll
you
see you
all.
around campus.
See ya.
Well, that was
So
wonderful. What do you think? What do you say?
yeah, I really enjoyed it because we got into things organically from the conversation
We
that
really
I didn't
did.
expect, and that
No,
was that
we
whole.
did not.
You
Yeah.
know, it started out as we were just going to deal with misconduct and say, all right, how
Right.
do you figure it out? It
Yeah.
became a broader philosophical and pedagogical discussion.
It really did. Like we started with detection, then pedagogy, then frustration, innovation, and it just blew up. And I think this is the conversation that's lacking in this space, and this is something that we really need to do, and this is something that we strive to do, which is why we have AI What the Tech. All right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So let's do a quick teaser for episode 8. Dr. Indira
Okay.
Dutta is coming in, right?
Yep. Indira Dutta. We've tentatively named the podcast Zero Privacy, Countless Eyes from William Gibson, although she recommended
We
double-edged
call it,
sword, right?
AI and
Right.
cybersecurity, double-edged sword. But I think it's going to be
Right.
an interesting conversation.
I think it's going to be really fascinating. I will be more out of my depth on that one, so you're going to have to do the heavy lifting. I will ask.
We're
I'll
just
ask
asking the
stupid
questions. You know, we're just
I'll
asking
ask-
the questions.
Right. I'll ask the stupid questions like, that's a computer, right? You know. But she's doing some interesting stuff with the community and helping the elderly detect fraud or protect the elderly. Do I remember that
Yes,
correctly?
absolutely. And, we've known so many people who've just fallen fraud to like a bunch of these emails or messages or like, Instagram posts, and, she's doing work to try to detect that, just to make it a little easier. And I don't want to give away too much. She's going to be the one who's going to be talking about it.
The reason I mention it, though, just as a continued teaser, is that's a perfect example of how universities are still relevant. There's this belief that we're sort of detached. That's not true. Most of the work we do is actually going to impact the community or work with the community.
Absolutely.
And this is a clear example. And AI has sort of a double-edged sword, like she says. On the one hand, it can help protect us, but on the other, it increases surveillance.
Yes,
and
it can be vicious.
That can be creepy too. So bottom line is, tune in. That one's going to be real interesting too. And we have a couple other coming down the pipe. We'll talk more about those next time. Some of these are going to be pretty big deal, particularly for our podcast.
We're pretty excited.
That's just no spoilers.
No spoilers.
You're gonna go, how did they land that person? So, but before we go, don't forget you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all major podcast platforms. Wherever you want to tune in, we're there. Search for AI What the Tech in all caps. You'll find us. Make sure you follow, and make sure you tell your friends. I think these conversations are getting really fascinating.
They really are. Share, and drop in likes, drop in comments, start the conversation. Now, if you're enjoying the show and want to help keep it going, you can support us directly on Buy Me a Coffee. Now, every contribution goes towards making content, improving podcast, and bringing you better conversations, because that's the MO of AI What the Tech. Just head to the link in the description, whether it's a single cup of coffee or a full caffeine boost. We appreciate it, and every bit helps. All right,
we appreciate it. And send more fan mail. We've only gotten one fan letter. And ask questions. We want questions too, because we can do that at the front before every session.
All right.
So with that said, I'm Sean Huss.
I'm Bhaskar Ghosh, and see you on the next one.
See you next time.